College football playoff national champion Christian Miller on Tide 100.9 and 12:30 a.m. WTBC.
And welcome back into this Thursday edition of the Miller's Edge, Tide 100.9, 1230 WTBC. Big thanks to former Clemson wide receiver Brandon Clear, who just joined us. And now we go back to the phone lines where we're going to be joined by an Alabama legend, an offensive lineman. You guys know who he is. Mike Johnson, former Crimson Tide offensive lineman and national champion, and former Falcon, who he also covers currently. Mike, welcome in, man. It's been a minute. How have you been?
I'm doing good, man. We're, you know how it is in this NFL game over here in Atlanta. We're covering this new Kevin Stefanski hire and ushering out the Raheem Morris era. So it's been a busy couple weeks to the new year, man. I hope you're doing well.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and thanks for jumping on. I can only imagine it's been pretty hectic, but tell me, man, give me your thoughts. I mean, I'm a Panthers guy, but you know, I'm curious. We got a lot of Falcons fans, I'm sure that listen. Kevin, Stefanski. I know there's been, probably a number of opinions, especially this last year with all the drama with Shedeur and Cleveland and how that whole thing was going. But what are your thoughts initially just on the hire?
Yeah, it's funny you bring that up. We were talking about it earlier, and Deion spent 5 years maybe in Atlanta. Got in a fight when he returned and went went to another team and got in a fight here in the Georgia Dome. And he is as revered still in the city of Atlanta as any athlete could possibly be revered. And so a lot of people around Atlanta, have brought up the Shedeur Sanders kind of situation. But I think more than anything, it's just a breath of fresh air. Like you can exhale that you've got a new chapter coming. And it's not just the fancy, it's the fact that Matt Ryan's been hired as the president of football. And, there's a new GM on the way in. I have gotten a million questions about Tommy Rees over the last couple of days because he's rumored to come here and be the OC. And I obviously followed him in his time there at Alabama just a couple of years ago. But it's good, man. We're just kind of ripping the Band-Aid off and ushering in a new era. And I think as good as anybody, man, when you get a new coach in the NFL, it's a 99% chance it's going to fail. You just kind of hope for the best.
Yeah, well, Ron Rivera drafted me. Then he was fired before my rookie season ended. Then we brought in Matt Rule. And to your I guess your point, he didn't last very long himself. And there's been a number of changes with coaching, especially on Carolina's end, which, to be fair, we don't have the best situation over there. But it's getting better, man. It's finally starting to, I guess, take off a little bit. Bryce Young's finally getting some help, and he's doing a good job. And yeah, man. So, but you're right.
Hey, Christian, y'all are welcome, by the way, for that victory we pulled off in the last week of the season over here to send Carolina to the playoffs. That tiebreaker sure did work out for y'all, didn't it?
Well, listen, I think Panthers fans are just happy to even just sniff the playoffs for the first time in quite some time. And it just feels like finally we're seeing the other side of this thing just a little bit, man. And I think the future's bright. I mean, Bryce is such a great player, great young man. And I think the more they keep getting him some help, that receiver we drafted out of Arizona has been great. They've invested in the offensive line. So hopefully we can continue that. But Mike, I know you're busy covering NFL, but you also keep up with Alabama clearly. I mean, you're a national champion here during your time. And I want to get your thoughts. I want to start by going back to this past season, just your overall, outlook on how this season went. I mean, definitely was progress made, trip to the SEC championship in your backyard and then making the college football playoffs, winning that first round. But there also were, some performances that left you kind of scratching your head, not the best taste in your mouth. How would you assess year 2 under Kalen DeBoer?
Yeah, it's some point in the middle of last season is I got a chance to visit with you and your dad and, talk about kind of Kalen DeBoer and what all had gone on with him. And I think I mentioned to y'all at the time, this was, I don't know, maybe November over a year ago, just said, hey, I think we're going to find out a lot when the transfer portal hits. I think that a lot can be made about year 1 under Kalen DeBoer, but when the portal hits, we'll find out what the guys really think of him inside the building. And I think he fared well in the transfer portal last year. And I just, as the season wore on, I had so many questions, Christian, about the consistency around the team. It just didn't seem like they played with the same tenacity week in and week out. And there were obviously some massive bright spots. You go on the road and you beat Georgia in Athens. I think you have to feel pretty good about that. But you highlight, the Florida State loss, the Georgia loss, the Indiana loss. Those are good teams. Don't get me wrong. Aside from Florida State, but you also have to look at the fact that you got beat by 35 to Indiana, and you used to be that bully. I know that you were a little bit after me in Tuscaloosa, and we took a lot of pride back then in kind of turning the program around from 07 to 08 to 09 to winning the national title of doing exactly what Indiana just did, coming from a basement dumpster fire program and putting our toughness on the line and having, physical lines of scrimmage and doing all those things. That's before the big signing classes really started to spill in. So that part's been hard to stomach. I think my feelings about Kalen are still out there. I still feel like there's still a lot to be desired about what's going on inside the program. And I'd love to see an uptick in the toughness that we play with up front. And hopefully they can get some things figured out in the running game and on that defensive front and, really get this thing pointed in the right direction.
We're joined by former Alabama offensive lineman Mike Johnson, also a former Falcon, where he covers the Falcons and clearly Alabama too, keeping up with them. Mike, I agree 100% with you. And me and my dad have been saying, here, and then especially me being a former guy like yourself, I expect us to be imperfect, right? I think that's pretty clear in today's day and age with the transfer portal, NIL. You're not going to be perfect, but the one thing that stood out for me that was disappointing, I'll use those words, is not that we lost 4 total games. Again, that's expected in today's day and age, especially year 2 under a new staff and whatnot. But the disappointing part was the fashion in which we lost, in which it just felt like whether it was a lack of preparation, a lack of tenacity, a lack of toughness at times, that as a former player, in my opinion, I think is the most disappointing part. Like you said, you guys laid the foundation. You guys turned it around. And then it was on guys like myself and guys coming in those stacked recruiting classes. We knew all the work that you guys put in. And even though we had these stars and all that, it didn't matter. We had to continue that. And so it is kind of hard to see that at times as a former player. So I agree. But you mentioned the trenches. And I'll say this, that's to me probably the key to the success of this team moving forward, right? I mean, I feel like, yes, our running backs need to play better. I still think we have a lot of young talent in there with potential, but I think overall the trench play, it just hasn't been where it had been in the past, and we know how important that is in this game of football. For you being a former offensive lineman, you know how this game works. I mean, you know how the trenches work. There's a couple things that I was, I guess, questioning, and I'm curious your thoughts. First being all the rotation that we saw with this offensive line. Talk a little bit about your thoughts on that. And 2, just, as a former offensive lineman, would that have been a challenge for you? I always say, the offensive line is probably the position that needs the most chemistry. You got to be able to gel to play with one another. Do you think that could have been somewhat of an issue, having so many guys rotating in the offensive line this past season?
I don't think Thornby and Michael Carroll, obviously you had some injuries at the guard spots here and there, and you did the best you could. But when you were doing it on purpose and you were rotating, that's one of the things I can't figure out. I know that you guys on defense deal with a lot of the same things that we would on offense, Christian. It's like in between series, you have those conversations about what your opponent is doing. Hey, This guy, when he's pointing this way, hey, I'm going to tell you to get off the double team a little bit earlier because the linebacker's slowing downhill. I'll say off. I'll try to give you a shove. Like when you're switching every other series or whatever it may be, every other quarter, it's so much harder to have those conversations. And especially at a freshman level with Michael Carroll at right tackle, I couldn't stand it. I just didn't understand how that was even possible. I played my senior year with a JUCO transfer and James Carpenter, who ended up being a first rounder, but he came in and played left tackle. And Christian, I don't know that he knew half the playbook when the season started. It was me going up the line of scrimmage, walking him through things. Hey, this is going to be a B block. Hey, this is going to be a deuce block. Hey, look at the safety rotation. We might get a weak side stunt here, things like that. I can't imagine having to do that with 2 different people. I just genuinely cannot fathom having to have those conversations, not only on the field, but on the bench as well, going through film. It's the camaraderie, the chemistry is of the utmost importance. And, look, it's a different day and age. Transfer portal guys come in, go out. You have to develop a lot faster with a lot of these positions. But I also think that there's something to be said for kind of digging your heels in next to a guy and getting to know one another, throughout the course of the season.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. Defensively, like you said, we're always making adjustments and talking, and that is one thing that probably takes a hit when there is so much movement. But at least for us, we rotate. We like having fresh legs out there to get after the quarterback, and our big guys, they don't want to be running around so much. So we need bodies. But with you guys, and I never played offensive line, but I understand exactly what you're saying because that's how I always have viewed it. And I was, also kind of questioned, like, man, like at some point it feels like we need to just find R5 and just let them go through the growing pains and just get better together. Because I just felt like the rotation was just tough, like you said, to really finally gel. And it felt like it wasn't until probably the end of the regular season that they finally settled with, Carroll, Formby on the right side, and then I think Dewberry at left guard. Left tackle and center were pretty constant throughout the year. So I do feel like that probably, played a little bit of a role. As definitely not all of it. And that's why I want to ask you this part too. As a former offensive lineman, I know you're like me. When you watch the game, I mean, you name it, deuce blocks, like all the things that you used to do. Just like me as an edge guy, I mean, I'm looking at games that are being worked. We're watching it from a lens from a former perspective. A former player perspective. For you, when you watched these guys, Mike, and you saw the struggles in the run game, if you had to pinpoint, and I know it for me when I watch the tape, it feels like it was a number of things. But from your perspective, what was our issue with running the ball? Because people come on our show and ask all the time, why can't we run the football? So from a former All-American's point of view, Mike, what was it for Alabama that just made it so difficult to run the football?
Well, let me start by saying you're right. There's a number of different issues that go into it. For me, and maybe I'm getting way too deep into the weeds, but for me, one of the things that I hated about watching our offense try to run the ball was the timing. I think you guys on the defensive side called it being, in phase, depending on how close the blocker was to the running back and whether or not you were trying to put hands on a blocker or get around the blocker and things like that. The timing has to be good on the offensive side of it. If you have a puller, you don't want the running back 8 yards behind the puller, right? You want the phasing, the timing of it to be really, really good. And you can kind of get back into that and really, dig into the laboratory and say, well, running back's not hitting the hole hard enough, or our offensive linemen aren't athletic enough, or, this H-back is not getting around the corner. But it was all timing. I mean, there's, like I said, there's a number of different reasons why you get there. There's a broad roadmap of speed for running backs and toughness and size for offensive linemen, whatever it may be. But the timing was always so bad. It felt like either the running back was running into the backs of offensive linemen before they could get off blocks, or the running back was too far away and the blocks were being beaten before the running back could get there. And, I do think that there was less talent this year at the running back stable than we've had in some time. I did love Jam, and I'm with you. I think there is talent there, but, I would see a number of times that, guys like Damian Harris used to bounce outside and then they'd make a cornerback miss one-on-one and they'd get up the field for 20 yards. I don't know that we had that ability with some of the running backs we had this year. So a lot goes into it. And look, I'll just say this too. I don't have anything against the guy, but, Ryan Grubb came from the Seattle Seahawks, and Seattle Seahawks played against the Falcons last season. And one of the talking points of the Seattle Seahawks media going through that week was how Ryan Grubb was going to be fired because he could not figure out how to run the ball in Seattle. And when he was announced in Tuscaloosa, I was like, man, I hope he figures out how to run the ball because he really didn't do a good job of it up in Seattle. Well, Seattle run the ball really, really good. They're going to be playing this weekend, and we still haven't figured it out in Tuscaloosa with Ryan Grubb. So I think there's got to be a conversation around offensive line coach. I think there's got to be a conversation around scheme and finding guys in this transfer portal window that fit what you're trying to do.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. You're echoing a lot of what we've talked about because, it's a radio show, but we stream it on YouTube and I pull up the tape. We got the all 22 and we try to diagnose. And I see a lot of what you're talking about, the timing, offensive line, not necessarily finishing blocks at times or not climbing up. Again, back to timing at the right time, with backers making tackles when they really should have had a guard on them at some point. But I'm with you, man. I think that has to be figured out, and I don't know if it's something that they can do this off season. Hopefully they can, because I feel like a lot is riding on that. But I don't know how much you've seen out of some of these new faces. I mean, it looks like we've got a whole new group here, a new wave of guys via the transfer portal. But I mean, how confident are you that maybe some of these guys that they've went out and got via the transfer portal can come in here and make a difference? I mean, Mike, do you think because let's just be honest, I mean, I don't think Grubb's going anywhere, not this season at least. If you think
Right.
he's here, and potentially as of now, there's been no news of any change with the offensive line coach, do you think just changing the personnel with some of these guys, which again, if you haven't seen them, I'll just tell you, I mean, most of them were like depth pieces from where they came from, and I've watched tape on them. I mean, they definitely are players with potential, but none of them are really proven outside of maybe the Mississippi State guy that we just landed yesterday. He had some starts, but he definitely needs some technique work. And a Cal Poly center, who he's going to have that adjustment from going from that league to the SEC. I mean, are you confident that them acquiring guys from the transfer portal is enough? And do you think it gets done, or do you think we're still probably in store for another season of maybe struggling running the football?
You want the good news or the bad news?
Hey, listen. We tell all our listeners, man, listen, we don't do the sunshine pump, and we call it straight how it is. So tell us, Mike. Let us know. You can be honest.
Here's what I'm going to tell you, man. I get a lot of questions. And I just said what I said about Ryan Grubb. I've had this discussion with a number of different people, and say, I'll have Bama fans that talk to me. And look, man, I bleed crimson. I'm like you, but I get a lot of questions about talent on the offensive line. And here's what I'll tell you. You remember that team they had in Washington that played the national title a few years ago, Kalen DeBoer and Ryan Grubb?
Yep.
They didn't run the ball well there. I think their running game was ranked like 104th in the country with Michael Penix and Roma Dunze and all those guys out wide. They threw the ball out.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the Joe Moore award-winning offensive line. That's not a slappy group, right? That was a really, really, really good group of offensive linemen, and yet we're still hovering around 100th ranked. I think that at some point it just becomes the identity of the coaching staff. Now, I'll give you the bright side of how I feel about it is I do think that this group will benefit from maybe having a little more athleticism. I haven't watched tape on some of the new guys, but I've looked at some of the height and weight. It seems like they're trying to get smaller, more athletic players. Maybe becomes a little bit easier to climb to the second level. I mean, God knows you know this better than anybody. I used to come around 10 years ago to talk to Jeff Allen and Jeremy Giselle up there, and I'd say, God, Jeremy, I don't know if I could have started on these offensive lines with some of the guys they had back in 2015, 2016, 2017. These guys are 350 pounds. I played my senior year at 305. Yeah. And so I think there is some upside there. I really, really do. And maybe that's what they're aiming for. But I don't think there's a quick fix unless there's a change on the staff, like you just brought up, and they move on from Coach Cap or whoever else is in the building. I don't have high hopes. I think that you're going to continue to see a team that struggles in the run game. I think we have to excel in the passing game, much the way we did during that winning streak last year, if we're going to overcome some things. I don't know what the future holds at the quarterback spot. Maybe you can start including the quarterback runs a little bit more, the zone reads and things like that, and maybe that can get you over the hump. But I'd be lying to you if I said that I think it's going to be that much better to where all of a sudden you're one of the top rushing teams in the country. From everything I know from this staff and the players they have, I just don't see that big of a leap. Hopefully a small one, if nothing.
Yeah, and I agree. I think when you go back and look, I mean, the system, like you said, I mean, they had a 1,000-yard rusher, but I think if you really go back and look, it still wasn't necessarily their forte. It was something that they did enough to complement what they wanted to do through the air, which I think that's probably, like you mentioned, I mean, the goal of their system. I don't think it's ever going to look like what some people might anticipate, and I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. Would I love to see a return of that physicality in the running game, knowing when we get that 4-minute offense, we can line up and we're running the football like Miami does, or even 3rd and 2, 4th and 2. You know what I mean? And the defense knows what's coming, but we're running the football down your throat. I want to see that. That's what I watch you guys do it. That's what we did with Derrick Henry. I want to do that.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I'm with you. I don't see that happening, but I just hope they can get to a point where it is good enough to give us that balance that you have to have offensively. Because last year, me and my dad sat on here, we kept saying everybody would celebrate how we were playing and we were having a lot of success with the air. But when you turn on the tape and you're watching the lack of running game, you and I both know it's only a matter of time until it catches up to you. And I kept saying that on the post-game show I do on the network. I'm like, man, like one thing, I really want us to get our running game. I really want us to get our running game going. And I've had, I guess, like a false sense of hope after Vanderbilt. I think Jam had maybe like 135 or something. I was like, all right, they look good. There we go. it vanished.
Yep.
So I don't know. They got to figure something out. Mike, I appreciate you hanging out with us. A real quick last question I got for you, man. When you look at this team right now, how do you view them in terms of, we just got done watching Miami, Indiana, two physically dominant teams go at it for a national championship. And again, I know it's real early and you probably haven't seen all these guys that they've added, and we'll know more after the spring, but where things stand with the departures that we've had and some of the additions, where are you at with this roster for your outlook for 2026, or even just for this football team? Do you have some level of confidence that it can build off of what they did last year or some of the positives? Or do you feel like, at least for me, I think with some of the youth, I'm just being honest with you, I think right now going into the year, you're probably looking at maybe a 9-3 caliber team. Again, just right now where things stand. Hopefully they improve and get better, but just with so much youth and so many question marks, I feel like a lot of people are going to view Alabama like that. What's your outlook?
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I think that it's so much harder now, Christian, to really forecast from year to year in college football. Sure. You know, you and I used to look at it in our day and you go, oh, you got this signing class. They've been developing this kid for 3 years. This guy's going to take a leap. You know, this running back's been marinating. This guy graduated, but man, this guy's returning. And I don't know that you know so much from year to year. But I will say, and you brought up Indiana. Indiana gives me hope, because I think that Indiana, looking at them, they are built out of toughness, right? They're built out of tenacity. This is a team that would bully you around. We saw them bully Alabama around. So I think that if you can find that, right, if you can find that, then you really can take a leap. But I'm with you. I think 9-3 next season would, make me feel good, honestly. I think that when you look at what has happened in the portal, we don't really know, right? I mean, it's hard to forecast. You don't know. They got good players or mediocre players or players that fit the system. But I think we're getting ready to find out a lot this season about Kalen DeBoer, his staff. I think if you can get to 9-3, I actually feel good about that. If you can keep status quo from what you've done the last couple of years, I'll say this, though. 9-3 can look a lot different, than 8-4. And the 3 losses or the 4 losses you saw this past year, I'm not trying to see you get the doors blown off by Georgia in the playoffs and, lose the season opener to a bad Florida State or whatever else it may be. We got to compete. We went, 35, 40 some odd years without losing by that many points. And if that's going to be a staple in Tuscaloosa, I think we'll be turning the page sooner rather than later. So got to get it pointed in the right direction. And 9-3 is 9-3, but I feel good about that, honestly, knowing what I know.
Yeah, listen, at this point, I'm with you. It's less about the numbers so much. I just want to see the product. I want to see the competitive nature. I want to see that spirit, and I'll be fine with whatever result that we do get, as long as we can get back to playing that style of football. Mike, man, I appreciate you taking the time to join us. I know you're busy with the new hire covering the Falcons and all the good stuff that you're doing, man. Before we let you go, man, tell everybody how they can keep up with you. I know you got your show. You cover the Falcons. I know we got a lot of Falcons fans. How can everybody listen to all the great work that you're doing?
Yeah, man, we're over here on 99 The Game over near Atlanta. We're the official Falcons, Atlanta Hawks, Atlanta United, and we're on every morning for anybody, that's in the Atlanta area. Check us out, 6 to 9 a.m. But you can find all the info on my social at mpjohnson79 on the Twitter, man. So I appreciate it, Christian. Anytime. I've told you this before, man. My dad loves your show. My dad listens to you every single day on the app down there, man. So shout out to him, and appreciate you keeping him entertained every day.
Oh, well, I appreciate him putting up with me and my dad, man. Sometimes we cut loose a little bit going back and forth, but I think that's probably what he enjoys about it, some of that banter. But tell him, shout out to Mr. Johnson, man, for being an awesome listener, and obviously his son joining us. Mike, I appreciate you, brother. We'll catch up soon.
Thanks, buddy. Anytime.
Yes, sir.